Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
All right, guys. How about that debate, huh? Oh, man. We've got a lot to talk about. But first, we have a CPI. So let's try and focus. Try and focus on the CPI. You can ask me questions and help me know where we want to go with this. Really quickly, do I have time here? No, hold on. So I got the new headphones. They're a little loud here. There we go. Let's try that. That's a little bit better. All right. So let's just really quickly go through the charts here. We've got Treasuries a little bit higher during the debates and not much since then. S&P 500 back and forth. I'm going to be real fast here. Oil just taking a complete dive yesterday. Big deal. Silver and gold a little bit higher. Copper, higher end of the range. Japanese yen spiking a little bit yesterday. Bitcoin giving up some of its gains. So, coming back over to here. Big news that we got coming here is the US CPI. Month over month, they're looking for a reading of spot 2% versus a previous reading of spot 2%. And for core CPI, they're looking for a reading of spot 2 versus previous reading of spot 2%. And I anticipate that they will probably come in right in line with those numbers. So let's turn the music down a little bit. Still trying to get the levels all right. I think I need a new, the next thing is I need a new audio interface because it doesn't have enough gain for this microphone. You can hear the hiss a little bit better in these ones. I don't know. I'm a little torn about these headphones because they kind of have the, we're going to prioritize the sound of it sort of a thing. So the ear cups are a little bit tighter and not as much space. So they do touch the ears. It doesn't hurt, but I can feel it, and I'm kind of wondering, like, are these really for me or not? Pretty good flat sound profile, though. I do sound good in them, too. Hey, Paul, you didn't watch the debate? I wonder because, well, Reddit obviously loved the debate. But I was seeing a lot of people commenting. I think that a lot of people watched that. I think there was more viewers than usual. I could be wrong, but hey, Octavius. Well, here we are. The liquidity is completely pulling. I think even if they come in line, you're likely to see a bit of a move. So sit tight. Question though, I think that in order for us to get a 50 basis point cut, that you probably have to have CPI miss, right? Like get a spot 1 or a 0. There might be a movement and come back to even if it's in line, but if it misses, you can see these treasuries just ITF out of here. All right, here we go. Okay, big down. Okay, so core CPI month over month, spot 3 versus the expected spot 2. So the treasuries sold pretty hard on that one. Ooh. The markets are not happy. Not happy. Phil777 says, I watched a lot of the debate. Oh my gosh, dude, it was a long debate. It was a long debate. Like, we got through the first hour and I was like, oh my gosh, there's more, isn't there? I was exhausted after an hour. I had a pretty busy day yesterday anyways, so. Actually, I could have watched it on Hulu, but I went and I bought a TV antenna because I didn't really have a good TV antenna, so I could watch it on ABC. And you only made it to an hour? I felt like it was a little bit more mixed in the last hour anyways. Like, the craziest stuff was in the first hour. But what was in there? I don't know. What do you want me to talk about with the debate? I can just go into my spiel, or I can see what you guys are the most interested in. Yeah, it's 9/11. You know what? I honestly kind of tried to not think about it, but we should you know, give reference to what happened on September 11th. Oh, D. My kids were laughing about that. Was like, you think he doesn't know who you are? Like, what? Yeah. So what D's talking about at the beginning of the debate, Kamala Harris, and you know what? The Democrats always seem to do this. They come across and they shake Donald Trump's hand, and she's like, hello, I'm Kamala Harris. Like, really, you don't think he knows who you are? It was so bizarre. So many were not even born yet. What, when 9/11 happened? It's kind of crazy to think about it, that all of these kids that they've been born since then. He never looked at her at any point in the debate. You know, I wasn't really paying attention to that, but I did see people mention that. And the whole, man, she really took acting lessons, didn't she? And they vote well, some of them. You were in Arlington when 9/11 happened? For real, dude? That must have been insane. Youth Vernon, yeah, I'll cover that a little bit later. Let's talk about the empathy thing, man, because like that really bothered me. Really bothered me. It was like, if we talk like we're really passionate and concerned and empathetic about what's going on, then maybe people will vote for me. I could not stand it. It felt such bullshit to me. It's like, you don't give a shit about any of these people. You just want them to vote for you. And your tone of everything about your tone of voice seems forced. I did not like that about her. But like, here's the thing. Her campaign is literally appeal to women. It really is. That's her entire campaign strategy. That's why immediately after the debate, what do they do to try and keep their momentum up, or to blunt whatever anti-momentum they might have? They already had Taylor Swift lined up to endorse her afterwards. And she tries to play the empathy thing up every time that she gave an anecdote. She told a woman's story. 100%. So, does it work? Was her act appeal to those women to get them out to vote? I don't know. You know, my wife kind of thought it was grating. I didn't even say anything, and she mentioned that. to me, it kind of pisses me off because I look at that and I see, here's somebody that has gone through their whole life tugging at people's heartstrings, sleeping with people, doing all of these sorts of things to get ahead instead of demonstrating competence. That's what I saw when she was doing that whole shtick. But maybe it works. But here's what I will say about the debate. When I go and I look at the immediate reaction out there on the internet, I'm seeing a number of kind of the more moderate and analytical Republicans out there saying that they didn't think Donald Trump did very well. The Democrats seem very, very happy. The guys on Reddit just seemed like over the moon about the debate. I would expect the liberals to be happy about how Kamala Harris performed, not necessarily because she did anything that really helps her or changes the trajectory of the race, but because she debated Donald Trump in the way that the left always was saying that they should. That like Joe Biden didn't have the, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden didn't have the ability to do, but Kamala, she enacted the strategy that they wanted. So the lefties are going to love it for sure, right? And will women voters like it? Maybe, yes. But I see a larger problem here. The problem is that Kamala Harris seems to have executed on her debate strategy very well, but I think that their entire strategy is deeply flawed. And I think that there's kind of two major issues here. The first one is that her strategy is basically like to not give any details about anything. Like, she doesn't really have a platform. The platform that she does have on her website, we know, was basically copied from Joe Biden because they forgot to change the metadata. So they literally copied and pasted it. It's the most milquetoast platform I've ever seen. So she's going in like not really giving a whole lot of policy specifics. So like, if you're a voter, the thing that my wife said, I asked her afterwards, so what did you think about the debate? And she said, well, I don't really know what to think. I kind of feel like that debates don't really help anything, is what she said. Like, she said, I don't feel like I know anything about what Kamala Harris actually wants to do or is about, or any of those things. And I think that that's a very serious problem for her. Imagine that you are not a speculator, Seth, viewer, a market watcher kind of person that is constantly out here watching the political and economic play-by-play every day. Imagine that you're one of those people that just lives their life, doesn't really pay attention to the news, and only in October tries to decide who they're going to vote for, that sort of a thing, right? And you're watching this debate, okay? You probably heard that Kamala Harris was like a far left person. And now you watch her on stage. She's trying to appear like she is the big moderate, but she doesn't say anything about really what she's going to do. You get like general platitudes and things like that, but you really don't get policy specifics. Not that you get policy specifics from Donald Trump, but Donald Trump, I kind of feel like can get away with that because he was president before, and we saw what he did, and we can pretty much expect more of the same from him, right? But what is Harris going to do? Those voters really did not get that answer last night. Meanwhile, what did they see? Well, we have a big immigration problem. And you know what? These are the top two issues for voters. The top two issues for voters are the economy and immigration. And so what are these kind of like Pennsylvania voters seeing when they watch the debate? There's millions of people coming across the border. Harris isn't going to do anything about it. I really think when push comes to shove that a lot of these people are going to look at it and they're going to say, well, I don't really like Donald Trump, but I don't think I can put up with 4 to 8 more years of what's going on with the immigration thing. So I have to just hold my nose and vote for Trump and let the 4 years go by, and then we can actually have like real candidates next time, you know? Not somebody that was handpicked by well, I guess she wasn't really handpicked, but no, somebody that nobody voted for in the Democrat nominee, and you know, this rerun with Donald Trump that you know, I really think that half of the Republican Party was kind of like, well, okay, if you're gonna do that, but that's not really what we wanted to have happen, you know. I really think that's what people are gonna do. I can handle 4 years of that. I can't handle 4 to 8 more years of this immigration nonsense, especially your people living in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, where this stuff is happening. I mean, good grief, the whole Springfield thing, I tell you, I think that the whole eating cats thing is like a reverse conditioning. That's the sort of news story that you want your opponent to go all in on, because you can kind of sit down and say like the specifics of it that's not really accurate, right? And then you can use that to make that person look less authoritative in other people's eyes, okay? But look at the substance of the story. That town, Springfield, the population like literally doubled or tripled overnight. Is that what you want to have happen where you live? I think those sorts of things matter. And I think those sorts of things are going to be very big deciding factors in this election, because at the end of the day, this really all comes down to Pennsylvania. Who wins Pennsylvania? Which means that it's going to be get out the vote, all of the kind of the legal maneuvers that you have with and how those rules and stuff can affect the turnout. And then those undecided voters in Pennsylvania. People that voted for Trump the first time didn't vote for him the second time. Maybe they go back to voting for him the third time. The other thing, though, is that her strategy seems to be, I'm the moderate and Donald Trump is the extremist. And I don't think that this is a very good strategy for a Democrat, especially not a far left Democrat. Because the issue is, like, okay, first of all, there's no such thing as a radical Republican, right? Or the radical right. There's the radical left, but there's not the radical right. Why is that? Well, because the radical right is basically just like what people believed 20 years ago, right? So trying to paint, you know, when people look at Donald Trump, they kind of look at, well, he doesn't like the way that things have gone since Obama, is really what it comes down to. And hey, I think that everybody is kind of a little bit upset about how things have been going since Obama, and then especially since Biden, right? So like trying to paint him as a radical doesn't really work. Now, you could say that he's unhinged. They don't like his personality. They don't like that he really leans into these issues like about race and immigration. But, you know, I kind of feel like, well, and I don't approve of it either, I must say. But I also kind of feel like it's kind of inevitable, because those are the issues that are at stake. So what are you going to do? So I really think that her overall strategy for this election is flawed. And what that means is that while I think that the Democrat Party is going to go and take a victory lap, they're going to think that they won. The media is going to think that Harris won, because quite frankly, we haven't even talked about this, but quite frankly, like, it was 3-on-1, and that was absolutely shameful. But, you know, so I would expect that polling would show a bump for Harris after the debate. That's not uncommon. When I've seen these in the past, like, the effects of debates tend to fade. Every once in a while you get a debate that's like a really deciding factor for an election, But generally speaking, debates aren't the big deal. But what the debates do is they kind of set the narrative. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about now? Seems like we're going to talk about whether or not people are eating cats in Springfield. And yeah, again, this is like the common Trump tactic. Yeah, he's wrong on the specifics, but what people are going to do is they're going to go and they're going to look at it and they're going to see, okay, there was a woman. She wasn't an immigrant, but there was a woman that was arrested for eating cats. That there are residents in that area complaining about people eating killing the ducks and doing these sorts of things. There are people complaining about that. Okay. That's what people are going to see. I think that's advantage Trump, right? So really, while she might get that boost and people are going to say that she's going to win, I actually view this as a missed opportunity for Harris. She did not really do anything to establish herself as like what she's going to do. She did not really, do anything to bring in those undecided voters. All she did was maybe she succeeded in making Trump look bad, but I think that most of the people that are voting for Trump know that he has those tendencies and things, and they just kind of accept it as like, well, that's what I have to put up with right now. I'll say two other things is that Kamala Harris made two big mistakes, I think. I think she made two big mistakes. The first one was when they asked her about Afghanistan, she said that she agreed with Joe Biden's decision to pull out. So obviously her position there is maybe a little bit nuanced, but the net effect in the minds of voters is she is tying herself to the Afghanistan withdrawal, which Americans, that was really when Joe Biden's reputation took a nosedive, right? That was when his polling numbers and everything fell apart. It was after Afghanistan. So tying yourself to Afghanistan in that way is a big mistake. I don't know if Trump will capitalize on it, but that's something to watch for. But then the other one, and the one that I think was kind of a little bit bigger, was she really fumbled on the issue of Israel. Like, she pissed off everybody that's going to support her on this, because she said, Israel has a right to defend herself and all of these things. So all of that pro-Palestine crowd that were kind of maybe happy that she didn't go to Bibi's speech and all of that stuff, those guys are going to feel like they just got thrown under the bus. So that's why I was saying, does the youth vote come out? Well, I think that really engaged youth vote that would come out and vote for Kamala Harris, that they're going to be less inclined to come out and vote for her because of her answer there on Palestine. They're going to be very upset about her answer on Palestine. But then on the other side, she also still went all in on the two-state solution and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that that's going to play well for the people on the Israeli Jewish side either. So I think that was a really big tactical mistake, or not a strategic. That was a really big strategic mistake in my opinion. Now, yeah, well, I mentioned Taylor Swift endorser too. It's over, bro. Yeah. I tell you what, man, if a music singer's opinion of who should be president influences your vote, please don't vote. It's crazy. But I mean, it's a real thing. We're going to see how this goes, because I tell you what, there's a lot of things that really concern me about if Kamala Harris wins. Okay. The demographic change that is happening, the border being basically left open, that's a really big concern for me. They really are fundamentally changing the country in a way that I do not think is positive for the people that already live here. But But you know what? The thing that bothers me the most, though, is if Kamala Harris's campaign strategy proves out to work and people start to use that in the future, that I'm not going to be able to stand politics. If every political issue turns into who can be more empathetic and tug at people's heartstrings on everything, and meanwhile offering absolutely no policy specifics whatsoever, that would be the absolute worst spot that we could go in politics I could possibly think of. You know, for me, it would totally, I think I would almost completely lose my interest in politics. You know, low informed voters, but I don't think it's just the low information voters. It's basically, if you play to the female vote you win, I think that could lead to big problems. How do you stand politics now? Oh, man. You know what, man? So the debate, let's talk about ABC. Oh, man. That was the worst run debate in general presidential history. What's the word I'm looking for? General election history. That was the worst presidential debate in general election history, without question. Absolutely insane. And you know what? I loved it. I enjoyed it. I was laughing. I thought, man, for all the talk about that Donald Trump made, you know, that it wasn't his best debate, maybe. And I think that the main reason why people will say that is because he wasn't very disciplined. There was a lot of questions where, like, you know, you want to come out and you want to say something super impactful at the beginning, and he just kind of goes meanders into this thing that I don't think anybody really even knows what he's talking about most of the time. You know, things where he's leaving out a lot of context, and he doesn't know what context he needs to give. But, man, he laid a lot of body blows at the same time. It was fun. I had fun watching that debate. I don't know if I have fun watching that debate if it's like Kamala Harris versus the Republican version of Kamala Harris. You know, like if she wins and then we run a woman in 2024. Oh, man. Yeah, the matriarchy is much worse than the patriarchy. It sounded like she knew all of the questions. Oh, I don't know about that. Like here's the thing, dude. Like, and this is the thing that bothers me the most about the ABC debate. And I feel like I called it yesterday. I really feel like I called it. Like, did they give her the debate questions? I suppose it's plausible. I don't have anything that really suggests one way or the other. I don't think that it really matters. Like, just look at the questions that they asked, man. It was like, Donald Trump, are you the axis of all evil? And then he says no. And then Kamala Harris, do you think that he is the axis of all evil? It was absolutely ridiculous. And then, yeah, they avoided ever talking about any kind of specific policy issue. You know, like, if you're going to talk about immigration, why aren't we talking about Donald Trump's stay in Mexico policy and how effective or ineffective that was, and whether we should go back to that particular policy? Is it even practical that we can go back to that policy? Will Mexico let us? Like, that's a policy discussion, right? And how do you ensure that a policy discussion like that happens? That's largely a function of the question that the debate moderators ask, and they avoided bringing up anything like that. And instead, they had several questions that were complete setups for Donald Trump. Then, anytime that Donald Trump said something, they're like, we're going to do a live fact check on that. Actually, people aren't eating cats. Okay. He's going to argue with them on that. This was, I tell you what, here's the one that pissed me off. Like I understand people on the left, they think that debate moderators should be like gatekeepers of truth and should do live fact checks and everything. But this guy literally live fact checked Donald Trump on whether or not Donald Trump was being sarcastic about a past comment. When they asked him, were you acknowledging that you lost the election? And he says, no, I didn't. The way that I said it, that was a sarcasm. I didn't, not saying that I lost. The election was stolen from me. Dude, he is the person that said it. He is the person that knows what he was thinking at the time when he said it. You're not a mind reader. You're gonna literally fact check somebody on what they meant and whether or not they were sarcastic in a debate? Are you fucking kidding me? It was so utterly biased. It was absolutely insane. Like, every debate, there's complaints about this, okay? Every debate with Donald Trump, people say, you know, it's like the media and the Democrat against Donald Trump. That's every time. But ABC took it to a completely different level. Donald Trump was 100% right to be wary about going on ABC. Like, I thought that they would maybe try and tip the scales and, you know, they would ask questions that wouldn't be really fair. But I didn't think that they were just going to go all in Kamala Harris like they did. Holy crap. It was insane. And that's kind of another takeaway that I see from this, is that I kind of think that the conduct of the debate moderators is going to end up being a bigger story than anything that the candidates did in the debate. To me, it's a bigger story. I think for the Republican side, it's going to be a bigger story. And are we going to end up spending all of our time arguing about that rather than any of the moments from the debate candidates themselves? That would be kind of an interesting thing. So, yeah, they totally put their... Now, Kamala Harris is talking about, oh, we should have another debate. Well, you know what's going to happen is it's going to say, well, we've been saying that there's a third debate this whole time. It's with Fox News. You don't want to do it. And why should he do anything else when they literally went to ABC and they completely rigged it in her favor? Which kind of makes me think that we won't get a third debate, but and then they'll say, "Oh, he's scared." Man. Well, thinking about it is really just, it's so wild that they were that bad. It was bad. I was seeing, well, now the big thing that I'm seeing on the far right forums, and again, I'm not saying that this is true or that I think this. I'm just pointing it out so that you can kind of see what these groups are thinking, right? On the far right forums, they're claiming that her earrings were actually a communication device so that people could tell her what to say. So that's a thing going on. Yeah, you saw that on Twitter. That's the thing going on. I think that on the right-wing side that you're going to see more of that. Complaints about how biased the debate was. Accusations that Kamala Harris was cheating, etc. And that's kind of where the thing kind of comes down to, like, well, okay, if you thought that Donald Trump did so well, would you really focus on those things? Probably not. But at the same time, it's like, if you think that it's unfair, it's unfair. See, yeah, it has cope energy. It does. It really does. Like, when you look at it from like a logical perspective, you can say, well, listen, if they cheated, it should be brought up, right? But the energy that it gives to other people is that you're like coping, right? But that's where I kind of come back to, okay, just thinking about how is this going to go? Because my job is to predict, essentially, to understand the world and predict. That's the thing that gives my analysis value. Because otherwise, I'm just like another right-wing guy out there telling you stuff, right? The people, most of the commentators on the right, they're cheerleaders. They really are. There's some people coming to the Discord trying to be Democrat cheerleaders. It's like, okay, if you want to say you thought Kamala Harris did so well, that's great. But this doesn't really provide a whole lot of value to people, right? We need to predict and be able to convert that information into future decisions for you that benefit you monetarily. That's what makes my analysis have value. So, you know, I think that Kamala Harris probably will get a boost. Not because she like clearly won the debate necessarily, but I think that it will probably improve passion. What do we call it? Like the Democrat Party is going to feel a little bit higher, and that's going to show up in the models that like Democrats are going to be slightly more likely than they were to come out. And that's, yeah, enthusiasm. That's the word that I'm looking for. You're right. The Democrat enthusiasm is going to go up, and you're probably going to see that in polling numbers, a boost for Kamala Harris. But my opinion of like the trajectory, overall trajectory of the race doesn't change, right? What we saw was Kamala Harris got in, she saw a huge bump, and there was kind of the post-convention bounce, and then she started to fade. And why did she start to fade? Because voters don't trust her. They don't know who she is. And because Donald Trump is winning on the two issues people care about, the economy and immigration. Did she help herself there? No, she didn't. And then you look at the other side of it, the things that she can do to really help herself, which is to get out youth vote and female vote. Did she do it on the youth vote? No, I think she squandered that. I think that her answer on Palestine is probably going to cause less kids to come out and vote for her. Did she get it on the female vote? I don't know. Like maybe. I don't think that she hurt herself amongst the female vote, so I kind of think that she has the female vote in the bag anyways. It's just kind of a question of like, how much of the female vote is really going to come out and how much does it matter, and does it overcome that other group of people in Pennsylvania that kind of like, I forget what they call them, but there's kind of this whole study of this group of people in Pennsylvania that like, they don't like Donald Trump, and all of the polling and everything, they say that they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. But then when election day comes, it's like they hear the clarion call of Donald Trump, like, oh, there's immigrants eating cats, and they go and they vote for him, right? So does the Kamala Harris bringing out maybe more of the female vote overcome that? I'm not so sure. But that's kind of like the deciding factor. The other thing that came out now is Kamala is rigging Polygon. Dude, I would not pay any attention at all to Polymarket or Predict It or any of these, because two things happened with the prediction markets. Okay, the first thing was that the SEC basically came out and said, we're not going to approve anybody for political betting, which I don't know why they were doing that or what their argument was, but they said they weren't. They banned it. So there's not actually a legitimate exchange in the United States that can do sports betting. Actually, there is now because Kalshi has been approved to do it. So you will have political betting in Kalshi, but I don't think that they have an election market set up yet. The other issue is that some of the key exchanges had certain betting markets that the bettors were unhappy with. I forget what the specific issue was, but you know, they have all of these details about this is what qualifies as it, you know, happening and it not happening. And they came out and they said that it didn't happen when everybody that betted said that it was going to happen, and they felt that the rules should mean that it did happen. And when that happened, like, a lot of people abandoned those platforms too. So the poly market in particular simply does not have enough activity to have any value to you whatsoever. So anytime that you see any political pundit, people on Reddit, etc., talking about what the betting markets are saying, just ignore them. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. The betting markets are just BS right now. You're talking about like looking at like what a dozen people think, because they're just not very active markets. So it's Kamala rigging poly market. All it would take is one person coming into that market and trying to buy it up to move that market. Like, it's just not. And especially you're looking at like a one-day move or like a move during the debates. It's not going to be a very effective indicator of anything. Now, on the other hand, you have these financial markets. The treasuries did bid up a little bit during the debate, which I actually think is really, really interesting. So, like, one of the things Kamala Harris brought up was that there was a Goldman Sachs analysis that basically said that Donald Trump's tariffs would hurt the economy more than Kamala Harris's proposed spendings. I feel that the analysis that they did is not really fair to what the candidates are both proposing and what is actually realistic to happen if they were put into office. Donald Trump will probably impose tariffs, but it's not going to be like a huge tariff across the board. It's just not. That would crash the economy. It would be a terrible thing. Of course it would. It's not going to happen. Maybe he really does want to do that. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader, but I would think that his advisors would talk him out of it. You really don't have a strong enough economy to really run those sorts of things anyways. But she brought that up. So, like, if that's the case, then shouldn't the market, seeing that Kamala Harris is more likely to win, be like a risk-on market? Well, that is not what happened last night. Because what happened last night was, like, it seems like the market said, okay, Kamala Harris didn't completely fall over. That means that this race is going to be closer than we thought. And it turned into a risk-off trade. The treasuries were up. The Japanese yen was probably up the most. Man. So now let's kind of tie it all together with the CPI that we just got here. That moved so far and so heavy, I wasn't going to try and touch it. We could probably try playing with it now. This could be a situation where it would be hard. It's a hard call. Maybe we'll get a new low. I don't know. Let's see. Probably going to be a little bit of a difficult trading. I'm still a little bit sick, so I think we need to take a trade tomorrow, but I'm still kind of leaning towards being a little bit hands-off right now. But the core CPI month over month was spot 3 versus the expected spot 2. That means that the Federal Reserve can really only do a 25 basis point cut. And then you have to see how the market reacts to that. If, we continue to see inflation sticky at the spot 3 or even worse spot 4, it's going to make it very difficult for them to continue to cut rates. And that means that the market that we are going to have going into the election is going to look really tight. It's going to look tight, I think. And that's not good for the party in power. It's actually, thinking back on it, it's a little bit bothersome to me. They started out with the question about the economy in the debate. Kamala Harris basically avoided answering the question about, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And then, like, that was the end of it. Like, they didn't really talk about the economy much more than that. One of the things that I saw in the debate a lot that I thought is kind of weird I'm not seeing other people talk about was, like, the whole debate was Kamala Harris would say something, accuse Donald Trump of something that was just objectively false. For instance, she claimed that Donald Trump wanted a national sales tax. She called it the Trump sales tax. So I think what she's referring to is a bill that was proposed by a Republican, but, like a crazy libertarian guy. Not Donald Trump never advocated for this tax or anything. He thinks that a national sales tax is bad. Okay. But they're trying to tie him to it. So she outright lied about the sales tax. And then, like, every answer that Donald Trump she's lying about this. She's just, like, completely figging about this. And it was really wild in juxtaposition with every time that Donald Trump said something, the debate moderators were like, we're going to fact check that. Well, why didn't you fact check all of Kamala Harris's lies? I mean, granted, her lies were about Donald Trump, so I guess Donald Trump is there to push back, but still, It was really off-putting. But that kind of brings me to like my main conclusion though, and it comes back to like what my wife told me. Like, I don't think that the debate really helps people a whole lot. That debate doesn't. No, I love debates. I love presidential debates. I kind of think that abandoning the Commission on Presidential Debates was a mistake. And I think that was a mistake because the debate that ABC ran was shameful. Absolutely shameful. But it is really just kind of a mirror of what I'm seeing this whole campaign. I have never seen a more vapid campaign. Like, presidential campaigns tend to be kind of vapid and like that and everything, but this one is really, really bad. And this is frankly a critique of Donald Trump, maybe more than it is a critique of Kamala Harris. Because, like, here's the thing. Hey, Kamala Harris, her policy platform, she didn't put something out until just before the debate. She's got a really vague platform that doesn't really take a stand on anything and was mostly copied and pasted from Joe Biden. Okay. Would she be able to get away with that if she was running against a different Republican? Like, let's say that it was like a really big policy wonk. Who's a big policy wonk? I don't know. Ted Cruz, maybe? I don't know if Ted Cruz would be a good example because he's pretty far right and they would be painting him as an extremist. But, you know, if she was running against a Republican policy wonk, would she be able to get away with it? I don't think that she would. So I think that a lot of the blame goes to Donald Trump. But this campaign has been the most vapid campaign that I've ever seen. Neither candidate has shown any kind of understanding about the regulatory legal systems that we're talking about here to provide substantive answers about what policies they want to change and debating what the actual impacts of those policies would be. So if you are a person that, you know, you're concerned about the trajectory of the country and you say, look, we have some systems in our country that have fundamental problems we need to address in order to continue to progress as a society, you're just going to be completely disappointed because neither candidate has the capacity to do that. And I am very concerned, especially if Kamala Harris wins, that will be politics for the rest of our lives and that we will never solve those problems. So that was probably a bit of a bummer, but hey, that's the way that I see it. We're getting a little bit more of a pullback in the treasuries. Maybe we'll get an opportunity to go for this. The problem here is you got to play the game of like, how far back is it going to go? Like, what's the right spot? And we're going to have to be relatively vigilant to catch it. But let me watch with a sim order. We'll see if maybe we can catch it. Well, liquidity is not quite as... I don't know. So the first thing I'm kind of looking for here is like, okay, do we have signs of large meta orders short? Or signs that like larger, higher time frame players are coming in and saying, because of that CPI, we need to sell. And if we're in a pullback of sorts, you're not going to see that in the cumulative delta. So then I would be looking on the DOM and things like that for those sorts of signs, and I'm not seeing that at all. What I'm seeing is just market makers reacting to what was a pretty big move. So that means we're going to get some movement, but that doesn't really provide me a whole lot to work with if I'm looking for a point to go short. Oh, by the way, DC Verex, good morning. Well, we're gonna start seeing one of the difficulties I'm having here today. You know, like I want to see for the debate what are there some post-debate polling? What was like the focus groups? What do different pundits think about it, etc., etc.? And I'm not really getting a whole lot of that yet. It used to be that overnight you would get a lot, but you know what? A lot of that would come from Politico, and Politico has become a leftist rag. So like, unfortunately, not as useful. I wish that there was like a right-wing version of Politico, because I used to love reading Politico before they just took like the hard left turn. They used to be a good resource for understanding what was going on from an insider perspective in Washington, D.C. But at some point, they turned into just outright advocating for the left. And it wasn't very valuable anymore. I guess I can check like hot airs and so forth, but I don't know if they'll have stories up. Well, David Strom has a story up. Okay, Kamala secures the coveted pop star endorsements.
Block by.
Okay, interesting. Block buy at 08.5, so let's recenter right there. A little bit aggressive on the buying side, and actually across the board as well. Correlated with the Japanese yen, but I kind of feel like, you know, there was volume in it, so it probably was the treasuries driving. Not seeing gold come up as much. It's so the dollar is moving with it as well. So, oh, and what about the yield curve? Well, we had a pretty big flattening from the news, and we've been unwinding that flattening this whole way. So that has me way off balance, because on one hand, like that 46.77 at 08.5, that would be a good reason for them to kind of build some volume out here. Except for that, they kind of built some volume. This was like the major node that was left behind after the news originally. But, you know, if I'm looking for guys to come in short here, higher time frame players to come in short, why am I seeing such aggressive buying from market orders there and across the yield curve? It's very much not in line with the flow that I'm expecting. So that move right there may have just killed my trade. Like, that is to say that the flows are different enough from what I was expecting that I'm clearly wrong about that, and now I kind of have to sit and see and try and understand what's going on to see if maybe a different opportunity presents itself. But I don't think that I can go short off of this pullback like I was planning. Oh, and Octavius is long here, huh? Okay, well. I kind of wonder, you know, like a big order like that, as of late, they've kind of, you know, that's been enough to pull them a little bit further. Oh, can you bring up cost basis? Yeah, it's at 14 right now. Actually is the little... I don't understand why the numbers are the way that they are, because you see that... Well, maybe it's just that the difference between those two isn't as wide as I think it is, but that down move was so big that it's kind of screwing up with my sense of perspective. But man, that cost basis is way up there. It's way up there. I would have expected the sell side cost basis to come down way more than it did. And so one thing that I see, help me out with this one on the debate, for those of you that watched it. There was a moment in the debate where Donald Trump was talking about something, and I think that Kamala Harris was like muttering or something like that with her mic off. I don't know, but he was like saying it's my turn to talk, you know. Sorry, I'm talking. So I think what he said, right? And does that sound? He said, "I'm talking. Does that sound familiar?" And everybody on the right is making that to be like the huge own of the night and the big moment and everything. But I'm still kind of like, did I miss something? Like some context in here? Because like, I don't know why he was saying that. Was she really interrupting him? I didn't, like, it just seemed so out of nowhere. And it wasn't that funny or surprising to me. Like, if I'm a Republican strategist and I'm like, what moments from the debate do I want to get played over and over again? I kind of feel like that's a big L if that's the clip that gets played the most, you know? I don't get why everybody's so enamored with that particular moment. Maybe it's just because the Republicans kind of all had themselves wigging out about that's what Kamala Harris wanted to do, so Donald Trump being able to turn it on her is like such a big own. I don't, to me it kind of seems like meh, okay, whatever. Okay, well, you know what? I'm being wishy-washy here. I'm thinking, well, they came to the big order. They kind of pushed through a little bit, and you kind of had that like splutter of volume that comes out because of that, and then it's come back to the scene of the crime. So that would make this location the location for going short. Right there at 08 probably is the best place. But so I'm gonna be really disappointed if it goes down and I miss it. I guess I'll be proud if I'm identifying the spot and the timing of it. But the flow is just still not what I'm expecting, so I'm not gonna take a sim trade on it. Let's see what happens. Maybe my intuition is right on this one. My intuition is that I shouldn't be trading it, but I'm also getting an intuition that if it's going to turn that down, it's going to be here at 08. Okay, so now iceberg at 07.5. I don't like that either. That's even worse. And it looks like it's a really huge iceberg. Let's read this story here. This is on Red State. A CBS focus group of Pennsylvania voters was interesting on the subject. It had 5 people. 3 people thought Harris won and 2 thought Trump won. One black female voter who thought Trump won said Harris just repeated everything that Biden said in the past. That was right on target. Harris just repeated all the hoaxes that Joe Biden says about Trump, and they're still lies. How is that a, quote, new way forward? Then the young male voter next to her said Trump made a strong closing statement, asking why hasn't she done all the things she's proposing now while she's been in office if she wanted to do them. And notice when he says that, the black female voter nodding in agreement like, yeah, that's a point, even though he said he thought Kamala won. The young male said he thought he was trying to sell herself as a moderate like Joe Biden did, but she didn't talk about her policy changes, that it was a facade. Now, Dem strategist Doug Schoen who said he couldn't vote for Kamala Harris because of her changes in position, made a great point. He thought Harris won the debate, but the problem was still the same. What Trump said in his closing statement remains the case, and also called out the bias of the moderators. So voters remain angry about the direction the country is headed, about the performance of both President Biden and Harris, as well as which candidate they trust more on the top 2 or 3 issues facing the country: the economy, immigration, and law and order. And many voters, indeed a majority of voters, agree with his core assessment about the core state of our nation. The debate was hardly fair, and absent a debate on Fox News, there's little reason to believe he'll get a fair shake on any other network. You know, it's kind of funny because I would expect Fox News to kind of shill for the Republican a little bit, but like Fox News has kind of tried to blindside Donald Trump before too in Republican debates. So I kind of feel like that Donald Trump would probably get a more fair debate on Fox News than other places, but probably the place where he would have gotten the most fair debate. I really think that the abandoning the Presidential Commission on Debates was a big mistake, because yeah, there was some problems with the commission and they weren't being very fair. But did you really think that you were going to get a more fair shake on your own, negotiating with the networks directly? No. Nope. Okay, so their conclusion here, that's really the bottom line. Harris can lie and the media can cover her for her, but it's the economy, stupid, and always is. And voters trust Trump more on those issues. Trump needs to pound home the message of the closing statement and talk more about it. And then, when he thinks he's talking too much about it, talk about it again, making the point of how they failed. That's what he needs to continue to drive home to election day. You know, I think that that's a really good point here, that like when I look at Donald Trump's, like, what was his strategy going into the debate? It really seems like his strategy was to bring up immigration as much as possible. Like, the first question that they asked was about the economy, and he morphed his response on the economy into something about immigration. Now, I think that there's some very good reasons why he's focused on immigration. Part of it is because that's the issue that he cares the most about. But also because it does seem to be a thing that in those swing states, something that resonates with them. But at the same time, I kind of agree with this guy on Red. Who was this, by the way? Probably just Nick Arma, so just a person. That the kind of message that I think is the most likely to do well for him is the one that, well, why didn't Kamala Harris do any of the things that she said she's gonna do? You're all unhappy about the direction of the country. She says she's gonna change it, but she could change it now and she's not. And particularly with a focus on the economy, especially with the CPI that we just got and the treasury market getting hammered the way that it just did. But I don't think he's going to do it. I think that the Trump campaign has made the decision to be all in on immigration and that immigrants are eating cats. Not what I want to see, but I don't think that it's a complete loss. Well, if I had taken it at 08, I would have gotten 4. So 4 is a standard move. Let's see if it keeps going. Like, if we get 04, then that was definitely like, I should have taken it. Uzi took it for me. Were you gonna take it anyways, or did I influence you in any way? I hope not, but because I'm kind of looking at this, what's going through my mind right now when I'm looking at this price movement is that I've had a couple of moves in the last few months where like there was a big down move, and I thought, hey, I think that we could go higher, or we could go lower, like that they're going to extend the move but later. But I always had a hard time catching it. Like it always, you know, I got in too early, and then I would eat a bunch of adverse excursion and it just didn't work, or it would happen too quickly and I would completely miss it, you know? So I'm kind of looking at this one and I'm like, well, I identified the turnaround really well that time. It was a delta play. Okay. I'm a little bit wary about reading too much from that call though, because I don't, you know, that very much looks like a pattern to me. There's like a pattern in the price movement and in the way that the volume played out, that there was like a really big order that came out, some really aggressive longs and everything, and then it kind of sputtered out and came back a little bit. So that's definitely a pattern I've seen before. I wouldn't say that it's super common, and I'm a little bit worried about like really making objective decisions based off of that in the future. But I do think that, you know, if I really think that the news means that the future orders should be short, and I'm going to take a short, that I would probably rather do it after something like that. So there may be an extra focus on oil today because you got crude inventories. That's true. And I guess those oil inventory numbers are going to be pretty important considering everything that the treasuries have been doing, won't it? Okay, let's read this Red State article about the debate moderators. If moderators do their job correctly, nobody talks about them afterwards, unless one becomes a legendary moderator like Jim Lehrer. Debate watchers don't remember who the moderator was. Back in 2012, CNN debate moderator Candy Crowley let her bias get the best of her and incorrectly corrected Republican nominee Mitt Romney's remarks about Barack Obama and the attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi, Libya, and her credibility was ruined. I agree. This is kind of one of the interesting things, is that these debate moderators, when they do this, like, they lose support and they don't do well afterwards. Candy Crowley was kind of on the path to becoming a major news anchor at that, and then after that she kind of drifted away. In 2016, another CNN personality, Donna Brazile, leaked primary debate questions to Hillary Clinton, and while she's not a journalist or a moderator, her actions even further damaged Americans' faith in impartial and fair political debate moderators. Back in June, even CNN's assistants couldn't help aided Joe Biden in his debate against Donald Trump, setting us up for Tuesday's night's debate between Trump and Kamala Harris. Not a single sentient being expected ABC News moderators David Muir and Lindsay Davis to be impartial in any way, given their history of reporting on the candidates. But the partisanship and unequal treatment of the candidates went far beyond any expectations and set a new standard for how not to moderate a debate. Muir and Davis repeatedly fact-checked Trump with questionable or outright false facts, jumped in to help Harris when she was floundering by switching topics or interjecting gotcha questions at Trump, bird-dogged Trump to pin him down on a yes or no question while not doing the same to Harris, ignored blatant lies by Harris, and inserted their own opinions and thoughts about Trump's answers. All those are correct. In less than 2 minutes, Fox News' Trace Gallagher summed up the disparity, an excellent compilation of the ABC debate moderators' complete dereliction of duty. After Trump brought up the issues with unchecked illegal immigration, including stories about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating the pets of people who live there, Muir interjected to say they talked to Springfield's city manager and they claimed there were no credible reports of that. Trump rightly pointed out that it's the residents themselves testifying to this at public hearings, whether or not the city manager finds that credible. Yeah, you know what? Trump was correct on that. Like, the story is that a girl ate a cat, and there's some people are pointing out that video, but that was not an immigrant and that was not in Springfield. But there was people at like city meetings and like filing complaints and stuff about this stuff. And one of the other videos is a person at a town hall meeting complaining about it. So on that one, he's correct. But I don't know. They're gonna debate. This is one of those things where like you're gonna debate the technicalities of a particular news story when you don't even know like what we're arguing about. Like, what is the claim that we're arguing about? That somebody ate a cat in Springfield? I'm not sure you can verify that. But anyways. Late Tuesday afternoon, the Federalist published the recording of a police phone call in which a Springfield, Ohio resident reported seeing a group of 4 Haitians carrying 4 geese through the streets just 2 weeks ago. Apparently, Muir wasn't paying attention. When Harris made false statements during the debate, they weren't on issues where she could claim she was simply mistaken. As our Nick Arma detailed, Harris repeated the bloodbath lie, claimed that couples are currently being denied IVF treatment due to Trump abortion ban laws, said Trump would sign a national abortion ban, claimed that Project 2025 is Donald Trump's plan, repeated the fine people on both sides lie, lied about the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity. Okay, I'm going to take issue with that one because I don't know if she lied about it, but I certainly didn't agree with her assessment of it. Let's say that. Trump said he would terminate the Constitution if he's elected, talked about both sides of her mouth about Afghanistan withdrawal and whose plan it was, and asserted that 140 police officers were hurt by violent rallygoers on January 6th. Not to mention Harris's lies about her own origin story and policies, and David Muir sat silent. And when Trump rightly pushed back on Harris when she claimed that Trump would weaponize the government against political opponents, Muir cut him off to say he had a lot of things to get to. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy, that I'm a threat to democracy. There's a threat to democracy with their fake Russia investigation that went nowhere. Of course, Muir wasn't interested in asking Harris about the accusations Trump made. She probably wasn't prepared for those questions. This is definitely a red state article. Okay. Overall, Muir and Davis would have done well to heed the advice of Jeffrey McCall, a DePaul University communications professor who wrote an opinion piece at The Hill on Tuesday morning with advice for the moderators. Muir and Davis must come through for America's voters, making sure the presidential face-off is conducted with the decorum, fairness, and genuine substance. At all costs, the moderators must resist the urge to become pseudo-debaters. The second moderator chastises the candidate, corrects them, or asks a gotcha question, their credibility goes out the door and social media will light up with charges of bias. There's no need to rough up or fact-check Harris or Trump. That's because the presidential opponents are right there on the stage and presumably able to fact-check and scold each other. The moderators control the microphones according to the debate rules, so there should be no need even for interrupting candidates. Moderators are there only to set the agenda for discussion, not to join the rhetorical fray. Questions should be framed so that each candidate can sensibly answer and have the same level of challenge. For example, Harris should not be asked, "Why didn't you tell the nation about Biden's failing cognitive ability?" And Trump should not be asked, "Why are you in courtrooms so often?" Such attack questions might be fine in a press conference or in an interview, but debates should not be reduced to dueling pressers. Questions need to be framed so that neither candidate directly benefits. It would be refreshing to see such a debate between two presidential candidates, but like most Americans, I don't believe that it will happen this year, and I'm not sure it will happen anytime in the near future. It's what the American people deserve and what the legacy media refuse to allow. You know what? That guy, who was that? Jeffrey McCall. His description of the way that a debate should be run is spot on. Dude, I'm really looking here Like Uzi, because he got out at 5. Why did you get out at 5? Because I tell you what, if I had taken that trade, I think I would have been holding out for more and would have scratched it. Like, that came back super fast. And it's now they're going to be doing that's a higher low sort of reversal sort of a thing, right? Well, that could potentially provide an opportunity for us. So let's just kind of keep an eye on it. Okay. Here's David Strom. Kamala survived. Trump underperformed. Trump had the opportunity to score a knockout blow, and he failed to do so. Kamala was faced with the danger of imploding, and she didn't. Obviously, the ABC moderators were in the tank for Kamala, but Trump could have taken a number of opportunities to stick a shiv in her, and he was too distracted by Kamala's rhetoric to do so. He defended himself rather than destroy Kamala. This was, in my judgment, a blown opportunity, but not a disaster for Trump. Trump's supporters won't leave with doubts about him, and undecideds learned relatively little about either candidate. What they did walk away with was a sense that Kamala Harris is sentient, and that is a big win for her for some people. But she didn't answer the big question, do you have policies that will make my life better? And this question will be decided by people who are dissatisfied with the current state of the economy, and Trump has to reach those people. Harris managed to skate and present herself as an agent of change. Ben Shapiro hit the nail on the head. Trump could have and should have taken charge of this debate, but he didn't. Because he didn't, Kamala is going to survive to challenge him again. That doesn't mean he is toast still. He still is more likely to win than not, but Trump should have walked away with it, and he didn't, so the race goes on. Ben Shapiro. This debate won't matter. It was just eliminated as an inflection point. The American people still know nothing about Kamala Harris's position. Donald Trump is still Donald Trump, and the legacy media is still a giant flaming dog turd. Oh, gosh. See what I'm saying? Like, on the right, at the very least, that the debate moderators were biased is going to be a bigger story than anything about the debate. The irony for someone like me trying to analyze the debate is that the real debate will take place among people who are going to tell us what they think. Watch the memes, the analysis, the polls in a week, and we'll really know whether the real effects of the debate will. I'm going to bet you that Harris has a slight bump. But maybe I'll be dead wrong. That one's hard to predict. Every time these things happen, it takes a while to sort out what real people think. What I or Ed thinks doesn't matter. We are bloviating voters decide these things, not pundits. Pundits will spew positive or negative opinions. Yeah. I'd say I'm trying to make a prediction about what the regular people will do, but, you know, we should get a good idea about what they think. I wouldn't say, he says a week. I think it would take longer than that, but. Okay. Let's go over to Zero Hedge now. Kind of in this mode that's like, okay, if I'm really not seeing the lows that I expected to see. And by the way, you know, it came up there. I wasn't seeing the float, so I didn't take a trade. It did come back down, but then, you know, it bounced back up hard. I don't know how you were able to get out at 05, what you saw there that got it in, but it going higher, I think, really reinforces my decision that this is not this counterflow is not what I was expecting, and I'm not completely understanding what's driving these orders in this market. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, so then the best thing that I can do is read things to people to help us, you know, while you're watching it, help you understand what's going on. So let's come over to Zero Hedge. You just had a bid there. Okay. You didn't ninja react. Okay. Well, still. It was a pretty crazy pick. Gotta admit, that was a pretty crazy pick, dude. Okay. Okay, so we got stories on zero hedge. Core inflation comes in hotter than expected as shelter costs unexpectedly rise. Okay, now I want to interject my own opinion here because I kind of know how zero hedge is going to take this. A spot 3% is higher than expected. It's not good for the market, and I don't think that it's very good for kind of like the market sentiment and everything that we've got ahead of us going into the election, but it's not that bad. Okay, it's not the end of the world. A spot. In fact, you would rather see under normal circumstances, I would rather see spot 3 than spot 2, because spot 2 is like we're underperforming inflation. Spot 3 is like we're hitting our target. So, following last month's modest miss in CPI, which sparked speculation about a 50 basis point cut, which was then boosted by the jobs report miss and the huge downward revision, moments ago, the BLS reported that, as only a handful of Wall Street analysts, strategists warned, CPI actually came in hotter than expected at the core level, rising spot 3% month over month versus the expectations of a spot 2% print, with all of the remaining metrics coming in line. This was the 51st straight month of month-over-month increases in core CPI and a new record high. Looking at the headline CPI data, the annual CPI increase dropped to just 2.5% from 2.9%. And as goods deflation is stalling and may even print positive in the coming months, while core service inflation remains the biggest driver. That said, goods deflation continues to drag overall CPI lower, with energy also adding the base effect for the first time since early 2024. For context, good prices remain down 1.9% year over year, matching the biggest deflationary impulse since 2004. Services continue to rise year over year, but at the slow pace since 2002. The 3 and 6 month annualized CPI rates continue to trend lower, with energy a particularly volatile factor. Under the hood, used cars prices fell 1%, moderating from last month's 2.3% drop, while airline fares jumped 3.9%, a big reversal to last month's bizarre 1.2% drop, and a reversal to drops in each of the past 5 months. Car insurance costs jumped another spot 6% after rising 1.2%. Furniture prices dropped 3%. I'm not going to go into the more detailed breakdown. But last and not least, and perhaps most ominous of all, is that while inflation refuses to be killed, even as the Fed is about to start cutting rate, supercore CPI rose spot 3% month over month. The biggest monthly increase since April, driven by continued acceleration in transportation services, which jumped the most in 5 months. Finally, money supply growth is reaccelerating, which begs the question, how long until the Fed's easing cycle unleashes the Arthur Burns Fed? Putting it all together, underlying inflation unexpectedly picked up as core CPI increased spot 3% from July. The most in 4 months. No, I can read that again. It's like numbers said. You can go read yourself. And while one can stick a fork in the market's hope for a 50 basis point cut, the odds slumped from 30% to 20% and down from 50% last Friday. The question remains, will the Fed really cut rates as shelter inflation inflects higher for the first time since 2023? I think that they will cut 25 basis points, but I kind of question about after that. Well, let's come back and analyze it a little bit. So here's the Treasury, the big sell. Cumulative delta has been a little bit wild. Here was where we kind of saw that big impulse higher, and I thought maybe that's a place to turn. It did, but then didn't get very far. It's reversed back up. So maybe traders going to trade. I don't know. Or a little bit higher, not quite to the cost basis. And you can see here that the yield curve flattened considerably. That's the 2 and 10. I want to come over and look at the 30-year. It's kind of a little bit even more nuanced. And what's interesting here is that the 30 and 10-year spread, it flattened and then is just like flatlined. So the difference that you're seeing in the yield curve is really coming from the front part of the curve. So here, with all that, maybe we should be paying more attention to the front of the curve. Well, what are we seeing in the front of the curve? There was the big sell, but then since then it's been all buying in the 5-year, and they are actually at the high of the day in cumulative delta in the 5-year. So that is very curious. I would like, when I'm seeing a big, change in cumulative delta, and I'm saying like, it looks really consistent and everything, I want it to be primarily in the 10-year, but I also want to see it across the board. And we're not seeing that at all. We're seeing it in the 5-year, which might explain partly why we might be getting a little bit of action that's kind of like, I'm not sure that this completely makes sense. But then that begs the question, why are you seeing so much buying in the 5-year? Especially if the yield curve was a flattener, because remember, a flattener is sell the front month, buy the back month, right? So this flattener is going down. That means you just say this is the front and this is the back. You sell the front and you buy the back. So what's driving that order flow long in ZF? I'm very curious. It seems like a normal occurrence. The market turning after it hits an order of yours and all. Normally being used to seeing it happen with a stop, though. It's true. It's so true, man. I really think it's funny that, like, it doesn't matter. Like, the thing is that you're going to come in and you're going to pick certain spots and you're going to make certain decisions. And it almost like doesn't matter what you do. There's going to be other people out there thinking the same as you. And you all, because you all end up thinking the same thing, it turns there. That's what kind of causes it. And so, like, trying to play this game of, like, trying to tactically second guess the market based on some sort of a pattern, that's why it doesn't work. You have to know what the larger flow is going to be. If you know what, like, it's a crazy thing, is like, if you know what the flow is going, if you sit down and you say, it's going to be net long and I'm going to buy, then it's like, it almost doesn't matter what you do tactically, you win. But then if you're not playing it like that, it's almost like it doesn't matter what you do tactically, you just get diced up. And that's always been my experience, is like the ones that I catch where, like, I knew that there was an imbalance and I'm in early, I might not get a good spot, but in the end it goes my way, and it really goes. Okay. Next zero hedge story submitted by QTR's Fringe Finance, titled "The Debate Will Backfire Horribly for Kamala Harris and ABC." The initial reaction to last night's debate is that Kamala Harris held her own a bit with the help of 2 ABC moderators, and that Trump was, quote, rattled and on the defense more than he needed to be. Generally, the debate is being cast as anything but the overwhelming victory for Trump that many predicted. But my guess is that both the dejection from the right and the perceived victory from the left will fade almost immediately, as people have a chance to take in everything that really took place. For starters, the times when Trump looked the worst, like when moderators tried to debunk him on the Springfield, Ohio animal pet killings that were confirmed by 911 call minutes before the debate, will once again be proven to be factual and on point. The delivery wasn't fantastic, but over the last 3 years, the country's tolerance for being lied to by the media has shrunk significantly, so it won't take as long as it normally would for people to see past Trump's delivery. People are thinking critically now more than ever and doing their own independent fact-checking. Well, I don't know about that, but that people are doing their more independent fact-checking than ever. But here they're linking to a call from August 26th to the Clark County Sheriff in Springfield, Ohio, shows a caller reporting 4 Haitian migrants carrying dead geese to the police. Then there's this guy. And it is some guy that has a very much right here.
I couldn't make out the first three of the license plate, and I see a group of Haitian people. There was about 4 of them. They all had geese in their hand. They got away. I couldn't make out the first three of the license plate, but I got the numbers. The last numbers was 9898, and it was a gray Toyota Tacoma that took off on.
Okay, that's interesting, actually. I mean, this seems like something that will cause people to go down into a rabbit hole, because now everybody's going to be looking for this car to see if Asian immigrants actually did kill geese. Oh, man. But they say that came out just before the debate? Well, that's interesting to me. That's interesting to me. So maybe the duck cat thing becomes an even bigger deal than it seems like it is right now. Okay. Okay, anyways, in short, people will quickly realize that Trump's comments sounded justified, and if Americans need a reminder as to why doing their own fact-checking is so important, they only need to look at Kamala Harris's near admission that COVID came out in a lab in China early in the debate. Oh, dude, that totally didn't even occur to me. Like, I remember her saying that, basically saying that, you know, what was it that she said, essentially? She was like, you were being too nice to the Chinese when, you know, we think that maybe they released the COVID, so why were you doing that? And she was kind of using that to attack him. But isn't that kind of an admission that the media was wrong and that the lab leak theory is plausible? That actually is a huge deal. That is actually a huge deal, and I totally missed that. Very, very. So I'm glad I read that article, even though I don't know if I completely agree with this guy's analysis. 3 years ago, her side of the aisle would have called you a conspiracy theorist and banned you from social media for saying so. I've already written extensively about how the media has lost significant credibility with independent and moderate voters due to their covering for Joe Biden in the midst of his obvious mental decline. I wrote about it in an article a couple of months ago, simply called "We Can Be Lied to About Anything." After last night, when the average critically thinking independent or moderate voter begins to emerge from the visceral reaction of who won the debate, the picture will start to come into focus, and it will be a picture of a news network that constantly tried to fact-check Donald Trump despite Kamala Harris repeating multiple debunked conspiracy theories like Trump's Charlottesville comments, which were already debunked by Snopes, and his bloodbath comment, which was used in the context of talking about the auto industry. When the average critical thinking American looks at the veracity of the lies that Kamala Harris put forth last night, including lies about Trump's stance on in vitro fertilization, lies about Trump being associated with Project 2025, and lies about Trump not wanting to secure the border, it's going to be very difficult to look back on this debate as a victory for her. And God forbid these same debate moderate voters were looking for an actual policy stance from Harris. Despite being well seasoned in her narrative and her answers, and obviously prepared to answer questions she may or may not have received in advance, while benefiting from two friendly moderators and a question format that constantly pinned Trump as the antagonist before David Muir would lead Harris to an answer to reaffirm what the moderators had already decided, she was noticeably devoid of any explanation on her flip-flop policies. She offered little to no detail on her flip-flops about fracking and her poor performance as border czar, and she failed to take accountability for what happened in Afghanistan while simultaneously admitting that she approved of how it took place. That's exactly what I was saying, right? Not unlike when she was first crowned the joy candidate of the left, there was a luster to her performance at the debate that is going to wear off very quickly. And in my opinion, last night will be just another example of a constantly evolving populace seeing the left-wing media for exactly what it is, an arm of the Democrat Party. Despite some mumbles and grumbles from the American side of the aisle, as soon as the debate ended, I reaffirmed to myself the trust in the American people to think for themselves and to see last night for what it was, in hindsight, a setup. Honestly, I believe that the rise of alternative media in this country and the legacy media's track record of horrific embarrassments like covering up the Hunter Biden laptop story and lying to the American people about the mental acuity of President Joe Biden have built up a BS tolerance for media spin in the average American. More people know today that the left-leaning media has a narrative and lies to them that more than ever before. This debate will be different from the other ones because it will eventually be looked at in that context. And when people go back and watch how the moderators constantly argued the merits with Trump while leading Harris in her answers to multiple questions, this debate will be revealed for the bias farce that it was. And then, mark my words, it will do more harm than good for Kamala Harris. Harris has already come out and asked for a second debate with Trump, ostensibly indicating that she thinks last night was a success. When the debate ended, the scrutinization of ABC's dirty tricks began, and they will be off the table in any future debates. If I were Kamala, I would be careful in what I wish for in asking to step in the ring for a second debate. Just because the judges saw round one with Trump as a draw doesn't mean you can go the distance and win by decision. Yeah, actually, that's an interesting analogy. Because, like, Donald Trump was throwing body blows at her. Like, he still had zingers and funny moments and things like that. I don't think that it was like as focused as it should be. And this isn't the first time that we've seen this. Like, I can remember, I think it was with Joe Biden, that the first debate with Joe Biden, it didn't go as well as he wanted. This is in 2020. And like the second time he came through and he was a lot more practiced and he was a lot more prepared. And I think that you will probably see that if they have a third debate. Donald Trump will probably take it a lot more seriously. I also totally see, I mean, I am partial to this guy's argument that, well, first of all, I don't see how anybody can watch that debate and say that the debate moderators were fair. I really don't. But will it linger in people's mind and really cause people to just lose their trust in media even more? For those people that still trust the media, I'm not so sure about that. But we'll see. He could be right. I mean, he has a good theory at least. He has a good theory at least that the harm that it does to trust in the media could, in the end, hurt Kamala more. That could be true. I still argue that the biggest risk that I think Harris faces is that if you get closer to the election and she's down, the Democrat enthusiasm will just collapse again. And then it's going to look really bad for her. So, some interesting stuff in that article. I'm glad that I read it, even though I'd say it was a pretty biased article. I think that's all we got right now. Yep. Well, they got all the way up to 15, but they've pulled back a little bit. We still got an error. I don't know. At this point, a breach of the lows seems very unlikely. The flow long is a lot stronger than I anticipated as well. But I think most of these things are coming back to like break even on cumulative deltas. So, and we did rebalance, like the market makers rebalanced there. Actually, very interestingly enough, I'm gonna look at the way that the inventory cost basis reacted to that, right? Once you came down into here, the shorts, the people that were market making shorts, they started getting fills on their bids. I think no, that doesn't quite make sense. Why does that make? Well, I'm not 100% sure why, but you know, this was flat all through here, and then all of a sudden it started coming down. So when we started seeing volume in this area, it came back down to meet them and rebalanced. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that the market makers have rebalanced. So it is possible for them to take another shot at the shorts. but I'm not so sure that those higher time frame players are really there. I'm just not really getting super strong signs that, I mean, there's icebergs and everything. But I'm not really seeing that like higher time frame bet. Equity's having a bad time. Is it a flight to safety trade? You know, that's a good point. Because if I come back here, and I put on the S&P 500, here's the open of the S&P 500. And you can see pretty clearly that as the S&P 500 has been selling the whole time, so I'll minimize this and now turn over to the S&P 500 chart, right? As they've been coming down, right there, and the treasuries started, you know, flipped around a little bit after that. So it does kind of look like the flow might be a flight to safety. But the flow is also long the Japanese yen, right? Like when the treasuries started to come through was when we really started to see the Japanese yen push back in a significant way as well. And by the way, that you didn't see that in the dollar, right? The dollar's still kind of up there. It didn't come back down like that, like the Japanese yen did. So then the Japanese yen is kind of more of a flight to safety play as well. So maybe you're right. Maybe it is well, how much of a change was it though? 60 to 36, 30K change. That's pretty extreme for, you know, just correlation, negative correlation with the S&P 500, you know? So it's kind of curious. Remember, we got oil at the bottom of the hour. That might cause a little bit of interesting movement in the markets as well. So why did the US dollar strengthen with the weaker CPI news? I can explain that. Higher than expected core CPI means that interest rates are likely to be slightly higher than expected. People bring money into the US to buy the higher, well, let's say that, which means that yields will be higher than we originally anticipated, than expected, despite a Fed cut coming. Higher rates tends to attract foreign money and strengthen, hence the dollar. What the heck? Elon Musk tweeted last night, "Fine, Taylor, you win. I will give you a child and guard your cats with my life." That is kind of a weird thing to say, I think. Trump media shares plunge pre-market after. Oh yeah, let's look at that. That would be an interesting thing to look at. Well, that actually is interesting. So, you know, at the beginning of the year, they had a pretty big jump slash boosting. And then, you know, kind of since then, it's just kind of like slowly fallen back down. So we're already like pretty far down. But then we've got this jump here. So the shares did take a pretty big hit overnight. And if we come back and look at it on like a 1 minute chart, you can kind of see where it, you know, when they opened up, they immediately moved down and then have kind of been sideways since then. So I do think it seems pretty clear to me that the markets are saying that Kamala Harris won the debate. I mean, it's pretty clear cut to me. Again, debates don't necessarily tend to be like deciding factors in elections, but they do kind of set the narrative. It's going to be interesting to see which narratives really start to take hold after this. Right now, you're seeing what you're mostly seeing, like if I go on Reddit, is just liberals besides themselves because they think Kamala Harris did well. Because they think that that means like people will see Donald Trump as this unhinged lunatic that they can't vote for. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. Like, they, you know, after everything that's happened, if you were willing to vote for him before, you still will be, right? And if you were undecided, you would probably still be undecided. But if the narrative goes into talking about how biased the media was in the debate, and they start to focus on this 911 call about Haitian immigrants carrying ducks, that maybe could end up working in Donald Trump's favor in the long run. So it's very speculative, very uncertain. Let's just kind of see. But the first takeaway that we do have to establish here is that the markets are saying that Kamala won. Wow, it changed my view. America will not be less divided after the 2024 election. Lots of people were arguing on that one. It depends on who wins. Like, I think that if Donald Trump wins, you will probably still see a lot of division because they're going to continue to just press Trump and try and undermine him at every turn and all of that sort of stuff, right? But then you get a chance to reset things in 2028. And that could mean a different Republican that's not as controversial. Maybe a better Democrat too, but I don't know. We'll see. But maybe things could settle down once he's out of the picture, right? Kamala Harris wins. I think one of the things that's driving the division is the immigration and policies that really benefit people that already have assets and hurt people that don't. And so I think that Kamala Harris will likely just perpetuate those problems. Not that Donald Trump would help, but I think Kamala Harris would make them a lot worse. And so if Kamala Harris wins, I think the division probably get worse. Do you see illegal immigrants where I live? So my understanding is that there are parts of southern Utah and central Utah that have seen pretty strong influxes of immigrants. I have definitely seen a kind of a shift in my city with the homeless population. Although that's not really so much an illegal immigrant thing as it was that there was this circuit court decision that basically said you can't kick the people off of, prevent them from camping on the sidewalk. And that was rescinded, and that's kind of going back. So, I've seen a little bit of that stuff, but I would say generally speaking, no. Which, given where we are in Utah and like geographically and everything, is a little bit surprising, but no, we haven't really seen that. I tell you what, man, if the sort of stories that we're getting out of Springfield or whatever, like people reporting that migrants are killing ducks and stuff like that, if that was happening in Utah, people would have such an absolute conniption fit, man. Because the culture here about that sort of stuff, it's one thing when you're talking about stuff that happened on the national stage and yada yada yada, but when it starts happening in your backyard, I think that the Mormon demographic would be particularly offended by what was going on, and it would probably be extremely divisive, because you're going to have a group of people that are very upset and offended by what is going on, and you're going to have another group of people that will be very strongly advocating for the immigration. Like, there has been politicians and even church leaders to some extent kind of like encouraging the immigration and to be nice to the immigrants and that sort of a thing. So it would cause a lot of social chaos if that came to Utah, I think. Like, man, I tell you what, you really want to start sowing division, and because the whole thing is that they have too many migrants in Texas, and they've kind of been shipping them around out to some of the liberal areas, like sending them to New York, and you can kind of see what happens in New York, where it's like they're trying to, still support it, but clearly it's harming them, and it's a difficult subject for them to talk about. But if you started sending them to Utah, it would be like an absolute mess. Oh man, yeah. So don't send them here, please. especially if it was like, you know, the small towns here in Utah that they like doubled in population in a few short months and stuff. That would be like such an insane. They've been shipping to Illinois, I promise and swear to you, it's even affecting super small areas that people wouldn't. Well, it seems to me that like a super small area is more negatively impacted than anything. So my wife talked about this. Did I tell you this crazy story? Oh my gosh. Well, so my wife, she grew up in Texas, in rural Texas. Kind of around Houston. So it's very rural. They were more of a middle class family because her dad was basically a nuclear safety engineer, which basically meant that like anytime that anybody had to do work, he had to, you know, make sure that they did it all within the safety standards and didn't get too much radiation and that sort of stuff. Right? So in that area, I would say pretty high black population. So she felt that like, you know, always saw black people all the time. There were black people in my neighborhood. In the small town, it was kind of like 50-50 and like nobody really thought much of it. And she had absolutely no qualms about, you know, you go to the store and you see black people, anything like that. And then she, when she became a flight attendant, one of the routes that she took very often left her in Colorado, where she had to stay overnight in Colorado. So when that happens enough, you get a crash pad is what they call it. So it's like a house where just a bunch of flight attendants live, and you just have like one bed in there in this tiny room, like a bed in a bathroom, and it's just a place to sleep for the night, right? It's called a crash pad. So the closest place to your crash pad, to have a crash pad rather, in Colorado is Aurora. So she goes to Aurora, and she got together with another flight attendant who was black, and she couldn't find an apartment, so her black friend found the apartment, and they had an apartment on the black side of town. And one time she went to Walmart, and the security guard at the front of the Walmart was like, you shouldn't be here. And she's like, why? What's wrong with me coming to this Walmart? Right? And he's like, look around, like nobody here is white. And again, to her, because she lived around a lot of black people in Texas, so it wasn't a big deal to her. But it was different there in Aurora, apparently. And apparently her story is that the guard eventually said, okay, look, like, because you really do need to get something, I will accompany you. You can go and buy something, but don't come back. She had never experienced anything like that. Now she goes back home, and you see migrant camps everywhere. It's like it's completely changed where she lives. It's completely changed where she lives. And it's not because, you know, like there's more minorities there or something like that. No, it's that these rural areas simply cannot handle, they cannot deal with the influx of people. I mean, the big cities, they can't deal with it either, but at least they have like existing resources to like try. When you get into these small areas, it's just, it completely messes everything up for them. And so, yeah, the places that like feel it the most acutely, I think it is the rural areas. So I was saying, like here in Utah, again, I'm not really seeing like stories like this, like that, right? There's this thing in Utah where the LDS church in particular is kind of pro-immigration, kind of. Like the whole thing is that a lot of immigrants become church members. Like the convert rate is so much higher in South America and among the immigrants. Okay. And as a missionary, you can baptize somebody that's here illegally. If the rule was they're here illegally, you can't baptize them, it would maybe be very different, right? But so because of that, the church has kind of always had this like tiptoe policy around immigration. And so they've told legislatures and in their, I guess you could say, advocacy or whatever, lobbying, to be relatively immigrant friendly. Not like sanctuary city stuff, but immigrant friendly. Okay. So Utah there is a pretty high Mexican population in Salt Lake. I wouldn't say like illegal immigrant population per se, but I mean, there's that too. But it's not like, it's one of those things like everybody knows that it's going on, but it's not like this huge serious issue. And it hasn't been this massive influx of people like it has been in other parts of the country. So if Utah started to get that massive influx, like they started busing people over here and things like that, I think that it would be a really explosive issue, because the Mormon population would be very unhappy about what's going on, and yet seeing their government and even church leaders saying, deal with it and like supporting it. And so that would just make it even worse. So like, people are already upset in these areas, like they're talking about Aurora and everything else like that, right? But if it happened in Utah, it would be like a completely different level. And it would be very, very bad it would not be very peaceful, I don't think. It's funny how deeply dependent on religious people the right seems to be, but how much of y'all are behind the very problems they whine about, particularly Catholic charities that are basically trafficking humans? I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of trying to give you a flavor. There would probably be a lot of people in Utah that would dispute like my telling of what I just told you. But I'm just trying to give you like a flavor of like the background of this for people. That's kind of like the discussion that people have. It's like what the church secretly wants the immigration, even though most of the church members don't. And so it is a weird thing. Could you see something where like you have a huge influx of immigrants and the LDS church kind of like goes all in on immigrants, and large swaths of the church feel that that's too political of a position and like disagree with that decision, and you have inter-church chaos? That's the sort of thing that could cause that, for sure. I don't think that it will actually happen, but like it's just kind of a possibility. But I guess the only reason that it's kind of that I'm kind of thinking about it here is now I go back and then I think about, okay, but what is it really like for these people in these Midwest areas where this is happening? Okay, well, I don't think that it would play out like it would play out in Utah, but I do think it's a big deal. One of the things that I had seen was that there was this woman that she testified at a town hall meeting that she has migrant camps like all around her house, and she's had to like negotiate with the migrants, and she's constantly having to tell them to get out of her yard and all of this stuff. And they've decided that they just have to move. Like they've lived there in that house for 60 years and they're old, and they've decided that it's not safe for them there and that they have to move. Right? Like that's pretty crazy stuff. And you really have to sit down and wonder, in areas like Pennsylvania and in particular, I wouldn't say that it's happening in Pennsylvania, but it's a lot closer to them than it is to me here in Utah, you know? So they're thinking about it. And I think that it's a major factor behind why Pennsylvania has been going the way that it is. I seriously wonder if immigration wasn't the issue, would Pennsylvania be as up for grabs as it is? Because from what I see, based on how they vote for the state legislature and everything else, and the kind of policies that they do vote on, that people in Pennsylvania tend to be more left. But they're still up for grabs because of the immigration issue. I could be wrong about that. I don't think that we really get enough information to really conclusively, but that's just kind of my impression of it, my intuition reading of it. If the right is what it says it is, it should at this point disfavor the church as much as the left does. Nah, I mean, maybe the Catholic Church, but only the Catholic Church under this newest pope. It seems to me that the LDS Church has kind of cooled it down a little bit in the Trump era, because they've kind of started to see that, like, I think that we were getting a little bit too much into political advocacy in a way that's not good for the church. They kind of shied away from it a little bit. You know, it's different with evangelical churches. I mean, like, here's the thing, man, I don't think you understand. Well, like, and when I say you, and I'm talking to Uzi, this is something that Southern conservatives, I don't think understand, okay? Church and God for the rest of the country is not the same as what it is for people in the South, where it's like the Southern Baptist South, okay? Baptist churches are distinctly different from other forms of Christian church. They really are. And the people in particular are very different. And so their approach to politics and everything that's going on is very different from the rest of the Republican Party. And what I'm constantly seeing is the Southern conservatives thinking that everybody else in the Republican Party should think like they do, and if they don't think like they do, that they're rhinos. And so that's where you're constantly seeing that, like, they claim that the Intermountain West conservatives are rhinos, and it's not the case. It's just that we do not see things through the Baptist lens. We here in the West, we are much more pragmatic about the politics. We support Republicans because we primarily want to be left alone, because everything that we see the government do with our land and everything around us is a complete disaster. And the best thing for us is for the state to be able to manage those resources, and for the local community to be able to manage those things, and for the federal government to go away. That's why the Intermountain West is so conservative. And some of the other issues, like just as an example, abortion, right? Like here in the Intermountain West, we're very much against abortion, okay? But I don't think that most Intermountain West conservatives would advocate for a national abortion ban. Whereas Southern conservatives are really like, if you don't believe that there should be a national abortion ban written into the Constitution, you're a baby killer. Like, that's the reading that I get from them, right? So that's where I would say that, like, your impression of what different churches have been doing in the political arena and like how people should react to them is, I think, going to be a little bit off from like what most conservatives in the country think, because the Southern conservative is kind of going to think that, like, well, my church and my politics should be aligned for the most part. I don't think most other people think of it that way. Granted, if your church is getting into the issue of immigration, it's a different thing, right? And it's just so happens in Utah that it hasn't become enough of a flashpoint for us to have to face that yet. But it could. I mean, we're in the area because it's absolutely a possibility, right? I find this issue of context so incredibly fascinating. Every time when I'm talking about these things, that's what's going through my head. Is like, okay, when you have two people and they come to a different conclusion on something, why is that? And you know, what are the dynamics? Can I predict how people are going to believe about certain things? Because sometimes it seems random, and I have to say, like, especially when you look at the market. You know, when people say, oh, humans are the same and human behavior is really predictable. And then I look on a 1 minute chart and I'm like, no, it's not. It's really extremely random, that human behavior that you think is fundamentally expressed in the price. If the price, if a 1 minute movement of a 1 minute chart is a true reflection of people's behaviors and patterns, then human nature is fundamentally random. And I don't think that that's true. So where do the differences come from? Well, I think it's because humans rely primarily on intuition to do things. What is intuition? Intuition is being able to do things and make decisions without having to consciously think about the logic of it. Okay? Like, do you think about all of the logic and calculations that are involved in moving your legs and walking? No, you don't think about it at all. You just walk. You don't even necessarily think about where you're walking to. You just kind of like will go there, and then you find yourself in front of the pantry and you go, oh yes, I came here to eat something. And right? You don't think that's intuition. We walk based on intuition. And that is the part of our brain that is the most advanced and is kind of like one of the key differentiating factors between our brains and the brains of most animals. The people that have the hardest time in our society, like fitting in and integrating with their society, autistic people, it is primarily an issue with the intuitive parts of their brain. The intuition that helps them walk, that's okay, but the intuition that helps them understand other people is completely doesn't work at all. So when I go in and you look at why does somebody believe something, why are they making the decision that they are, it's primarily intuition. People do not sit down and look at a thing and say, well, because of this and that and the other, the logical thing is to do this, and they make their decisions based on logic. That's not true. Now, people will say that, well, people actually, they make their decisions based on emotions. But I don't think that that's entirely accurate either. Otherwise, their decisions would vary much more widely. No, I think that it is baked into their minds, because intuition is basically, as you're going about the world and doing things, your brain encodes these things. It creates new brain cells. It creates connections between brain cells. It changes the functions that those brain cells are doing in order to, the next time that you come into that situation, it will spit out a certain answer based on the goals and what you've been thinking about and everything else. So if we are coming in and we want to make better decisions, or we want to understand the world better, then really what we are doing is we are trying to improve our intuition, which means what? We need to give people better context about what's going on. Ergo, Seth wants to talk about what is the difference between a Southern conservative and an intermountain conservative. And now you're going to put that into your brain. And next time you see something going on within the Republican Party, you might understand it better. And the answer that those intuition systems will give you will be a little bit different. And the challenge or the question that I would pose to you is, how does the content that I am consuming on a daily basis affect my intuition? Is the media that I am consuming on a day-to-day basis improving my intuition in a way that is objectively useful to me? Or am I consuming garbage that doesn't really help me? I try to create content that I think will help people and make them better, more intuitive traders. I'm not always going to be perfect at it, but that's my objective. But when I go and I look around, I feel like most of what we see, it's trash. You know? I hate these kinds of things like after the debate, because I know that like most of what I'm reading is kind of trash. It's like it's a bias. It's trying to bias my brain into seeing the world and seeing the debate in a certain direction. And so I have to like be careful about it, and I have to consciously note like, well, okay, but that's even if I agree with it, like that's a biased view of the events. And I need to understand what people are doing and thinking and where it's going without picking up the trash in a way that would negatively impact my intuition. Essentially, that's the challenge that we face as traders. Otherwise, you end up with the person that like they're always constantly concerned about the market, and they always think that the market is going to crash any day now. And then when it actually does crash, like that 1 to 3 month period, they're like, oh, see, I was right. And then they don't ever buy back in, and they never make any money from it. And everybody says, well, you know, even a blind mouse finds a cookie every once in a while. That's what's happening. That's what's happening, is that the media that they're consuming, they're not able to incorporate it correctly. It controls them. And it controls them in a way that they make objectively bad investment decisions. Well, I got about 10 minutes left. I tell you what, man, I'm a little bit shocked that the Treasuries retraced this all the way. I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm wondering if I have just become, or maybe let's not just say me. I wonder if we, the market, have collectively become too obsessed with whether or not there will be a 50 or a 25 basis point cut, when that is no longer the biggest, most important flow in the market. It does look to me like there's a risk-off move happening today. Like what I'm seeing is that the risk-off flow in the equities is bigger than the sell the treasuries because inflation was too high flow in the treasuries. So why is that risk-off flow so strong? Because they think Kamala Harris is going to win? Because they think that inflation really is really bad for the economy, and if the Federal Reserve isn't able to cut interest rates quickly enough that we will fall into a recession? Very curious. Bad news is bad news, though, today. Is kind of what I'm seeing. But normally in this instance, yeah, maybe equities would sell because higher inflation and higher interest rates for longer. But the treasuries would sell and they would stay sold. So for the treasuries to sell and the S&P 500 to kind of be a little bit back and forth, and then over time, the S&P 500 sell off hard and the treasuries buy up really hard as a risk-off flow well after the fact is really weird. The Kamala crash? Maybe? I think we have to put it on our list of theories that people are making a bet about Kamala Harris being more likely to win the election. I have found overall that the market seems to overreact to, the little twists and turns in the political campaign. That there's always some trade that happens on during debates. Always see some sort of a move in the aftermarket that is unusual for that time of day, and is probably because of people placing bets during the debates. Yes. So it's a reasonable guess. It's one of it has to be on our list of possibilities that Kamala Harris could be in part a factor. Of course, if that's true, and what I have said and predicted is also true, you should probably see that unwind over time. But that probably wouldn't be strong enough of a flow for us to take advantage of as day traders. So now with 5 minutes, I'm thinking about my headphones. How do I feel about my headphones? I think they sound good. In fact, I think in some respects, I like them better than the Pioneers that I had. The thing I like the most about them is that these earphones have some sort of like acoustic microfiber kind of material. It's very, very soft, and I really like it compared to like leather earpads. I quite like that. I don't like that this headband is rubber. I might go and find a cover, or maybe have my wife make a cover for it. You know what? I was looking around and I couldn't find any headphone covers made out of leather or out of a nice material. Maybe that would be an opportunity. I'd make them and sell them on Etsy or something. They do sit on my ears and everything, but my ears don't hurt after 2 hours, so I think that's okay. The big selling point of this was the wireless. I'm not using the wireless right now. You see, I have a cord. Because the 16 milliseconds is enough that I can kind of hear an echo, and I don't like it. But I think I will probably switch back and forth. I have it set up over there, so like I can just like unplug the one and plug the other and switch over. Which is probably, actually I should do it right now, because when I am my morning meetings and everything else at work, that's going to be useful. So let's see here. I'm going to switch these. And then I need to make sure this is on. And I push it 2 times to make it blink. And I need to switch this to the wireless and push the 2 outside buttons for it to start to sync. There we go. It's a little bit softer with the it's a little bit softer when I use the wireless, and it's kind of like there's a little bit of a weird echo. It depends on how loud I'm speaking. Like if I'm really close and I'm really speaking loud, then it's not too bad. But if I'm a little bit quieter, and then I can hear myself more and it sounds like an echo, and I don't like that. So that would be a good reason to not use the cord. But for work, I think I'm gonna need it, because, for instance, I couldn't get up without taking my headphones off to go and turn on the laptop. So I like that. So when I go to the r/conservative subreddit, I see stuff about 9/11. I see stuff about Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris, but so far I don't see a whole lot about the debate. I find that curious. Why such a sharp reversal in bonds today after the CPI? Well, we're not entirely sure. That's what we were just discussing. Riddle. I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. But it looks like that the S&P 500 is turned risk off and that the treasuries are rising because of that. And that flow has proven to be more bigger and more influential than the selling because of the CPI. So yeah, ASEAN is looking very comfortable above yesterday's high. It is very much a wild day. I'm very surprised by this one. You know, it's kind of interesting, my reading of it. I think I did a good job, because I came in here and I said, I think that there's a good reason that we could breach the lows. And then when it was coming up, I said that this flow is not right. This is incorrect. There's something wrong about my scenario here, because the flows are not what I would expect. And, you know, I think that my intuition there was very, very good. Of course, the optimal thing would be for me to have enough intuition to say, this is so strong that I think I can turn around and go long, and it could have made a really big win on it going long. But I stayed out, which is, you know, the next best thing. Anyways, it's time for me to get going, guys. So I will see you later tomorrow. Tomorrow will be Thursday. So a fast week. In the meantime, stay excellent.